Good morning, everyone. Like, here we are back on a Wednesday.
That's right. Yay. We're happy about it.
Yeah. Yep. So happy to have all of you here. Welcome. If this is your first time, we just wanted to introduce ourselves. My name is Bonnie Schmidt.
And I'm Liz Joy Moore, and we're really happy that you're here. And sorry, I keep getting distracted by the cicadas. They're so loud. I mentioned them in my live yesterday, but you could really hear them, right, Bonds?
Yes. And you know what's funny is, you and I haven't had a chance to talk about it yet. So did they hatch out like just in the last few days?
Yeah. They came out really like full-blown, full speed ahead.
Yeah.
This past weekend. And it's funny, they're kind of quiet overnight, and then I'll wake up in the morning and I'll think, oh, okay, maybe they're done. Maybe the season's over. And then it's like they wake up, they've had their coffee or something, and then they're like,
yeah, and they're like, yeah. And cicadas, if you don't know, they're like come to, well, I don't really know the life cycle, but it's every 17 years is when they like
hatch and
reemerge. So it's super interesting. So it sounds like there's cicadas in other parts of the world too. Trish was saying New Zealand, and so that's cool. Super cool. Yeah, and they are. Yeah, it's amazing how loud they are.
Yeah, strange little creatures, but
that's so cool. Yeah,
but hello.
Yay! Well, we are super pumped today. Go grab a pen and paper, because we're going to do some, we've been really, again, loving this experiential type work that we've been just, sharing with all of you, and sharing in this space with all of you. It's so sweet. So we've really been talking about courage this past month, in Mental Health Awareness Month of May. And today we're kind of taking the opportunity to bring it all together and really look at what really builds courage for a lifetime, right? And, the things that we've learned about courage over the last month are that courage really is like a muscle, right? And the more that we practice and use it, it grows like a muscle as well. And I just think that that's in and of itself is such a cool fact to know, right? And we also know that there's this opportunity, this pause, this space between the stimulus, whatever is happening around us, and our response, where we get to really choose in that moment what happens. And that was that Viktor Frankl quote that we added into the group space to just recognize that pause. And we've really learned that there's ways to really invite in this energy of courage into our bodies with movement and the way we position our bodies. And if you didn't catch Liz's live from earlier in the week, she went into another, what is it? The hand, what is the name for hand mudra, Liz, again?
You can do it, Bonnie.
I know, I just don't remember it. I'm like, I'm having a brain blip. Is it like Hasta?
I knew you could do it.
Is that it? Okay. I second guessed myself. So just these ways that we can, again, use our physiology to impact and support our psychology, and really stretch this courage muscle. So we've just been really excited to land with courage for this month. And it's just been a really powerful practice. So
and that's a little bit of a recap of what we've done. So if you're joining us, for the first time, this is kind of our last live about courage. Will change our focus and word for next month. So you can certainly go back and watch. For those that have joined us, kind of curious if you've been able to notice that moment of pause or space in a moment of stimulus. Bonnie, we haven't gotten a chance to talk very much this week. And Bonnie, Bonnie knows, and we both love cold water, but I tend to add cold water into my showers. But Bonnie, yesterday, I just, instead of adding it in, I just jumped into cold water, like straight off, right? And I was like, I'm curious how I'm going to respond, right? So
good, Liz.
Classically, it like totally took my breath away, right?
Yeah.
And I was just like, I had that immediate like want to get out. And of course, I went into it thinking like, how am I going to will I be able to pause, right? And then with my like face like fully in it, like underneath, I just like that I took that pause through the form of a breath, but like cognitively realized I was choosing to pause, right? And that cognition like then followed with this like more intentional breathing. And then I transitioned to like where I grew a little softer. It was still, of course, cold, but I was more willing to accept it. I didn't last like 20 minutes, that's for sure. But I definitely made a transition. So I kind of put it into practice yesterday. It was kind of fun in a more intense way.
That's amazing.
So there's this pause, and those that we've been working with in our All Thrive program have been talking about how they've noticed that pause a little bit more through our discussions this month as well. So curious if folks have kind of noticed the pause from any kind of stimulus for something that you would consider really small to something a little more intense. But that's been such a kind of a fun. And it's such a mindful technique too, right? It aligns with so much of what we do in meditation. But so I just thought I'd share that. But,
so good. Speaking of pausing, Liz, can we just pause and just celebrate the women that just finished the All Thrive program? I'm just going to send a shout out. It's so amazing. We just had our last session this past week, and wow, it's been such a powerful 12 weeks. And Trish and Kathy and Kirsty, we just honor all of you so much. We've just, Liz and I have been reflecting back and forth on that since our session. And we're just super excited. Super
proud of our ladies.
So amazing.
They walked the walk. That's for sure.
Did. It's so amazing.
As they are continuing.
Courage walking, right?
Yeah.
So, so I shared in my short live last week, Brene Brown's Wholehearted Living quote. And because when Liz and I were really considering what does it look like to really live like embodying courage, right? And Brene Brown always comes to my mind. If you don't know her, she's a shame and vulnerability researcher, and she does such brilliant work, has lots of books and TED Talks and all that kind of stuff. But her Wholehearted Living quote, I'm going to read it for us again today, just really speaks to exactly what we're trying to get at, the heart of what we're trying to get at here. So she says that wholehearted living is about engaging in our lives from a place of worthiness. It means cultivating the courage, compassion, and connection to wake up in the morning and think, no matter what gets done and how much is left undone, I am enough. It's going to bed at night thinking, yes, I am imperfect and vulnerable and sometimes afraid, but that doesn't change the truth that I am also brave and worthy of love and belonging. And I just love her. I love that whole thing. And, this idea that courage really is fear walking, right? And so what Brene Brown did through her research is she created these 10 guideposts for wholehearted living. And we'll pop a link in the chat when we're done to that list so that you can look at all of them. But what Liz and I decided to do, just for sake of time, and because we know we love to talk about this stuff and we could be here all day, we chose one that we are going to just dive into today. So.
And especially related around resilience, right? Because we know as we can build resilience, and Bonnie and I both also separately work on that so much in our work, and building this kind of resilience muscle allows us to choose a more courageous life. So we're really diving into, and again, like all of the stuff we work on, right? This isn't an overnight process, but we wanted to get to, okay, what are some step-by-step doable strategies to begin to build this muscle of courage and, instead of atrophy it, right? Which can be done if we're choosing to numb, right? Or move away from facing some of those stimuli, right? So we're really diving into one that kind of builds resilience.
Yeah, and it's guidepost number 3, which is cultivating your resilient spirit. And then kind of on the flip side of that is letting go of numbing and powerlessness. And we found this awesome article and then clicked through to all these other articles by this same person, Patrick Buggy, And he has, I need to
Great work.
dive a little bit deeper into his work. But it's titled Mindful Ambition, which I love. Yeah. And so we loved the way that he laid this guidepost out. And yeah, so we thought we would share that with you today.
Yeah. So what we want you to first do, if you have pen and paper, if you like to write, grab that. If you want to just think through this, that's fine too, or breathe through, whatever works for you. But first, just consider the ways that we numb. And Bonnie and I are going to do this alongside you, and there might be some ways that you immediately like, yep, this is what I do, right? Yeah. And there might be some ways that you have to kind of really think about or consider, right? And Bonnie and I were talking about this. This is different from just looking for comfort, right? So you might even use the same tool, right? Let's say like your phone or social media or television, right? And sometimes you might just be relaxing, right? And seeking some comfort, and sometimes you might be numbing. And the real difference between those two is intention when you choose this, right? And you will know, your body knows, right? There's this moment, right, where you're uncomfortable and you're choosing something to kind of numb that discomfort, right? And so with the difference we really discussed was choosing that activity, the intention behind choosing that activity. So
yeah,
the ways that you list,
this numbing is kind of this mechanism for avoidance, right, of something, right, and that it really does contribute then to feelings of powerlessness. Yeah.
So for example, I know one of mine is there's this like game I'll play on my phone, right? And sometimes I really just want to sit down and enjoy playing it, and sometimes I'm definitely using it to numb or, ignore something or avoid something. Yeah. So that list could be a list that is used for different intentions, right? So just consider some of the ways you numb, and you can pop them in a chat to us or just write them down for yourself. Or Bonds, I don't know if you have one you'd like to share.
Yeah, well, mine definitely is social media too, or any like screens. I will just kind of go down a rabbit hole of Facebook or whatever it is, and then time will go by, and I'm like, how did I waste this much time? And then it kind of spirals into feeling so guilty, right? Because I'm like, oh my gosh, I could have been spending that time doing all these other things, right? So it's a cycle that perpetuates itself for sure, which then leads to more, scrolling. So, yeah. So well, this is more of a strategy, but I'll just share it. At one point, and it got kind of frazzled on my phone, but I just stuck a little heart sticker on my phone as a way to just remind me, like, why are you on here? So every time I would see it, I would ask myself, like, is what you're doing on here helpful, to you right now, or not so much? And then just gave me, it gave me an anchor for that pause moment. So.
Gotcha. One of mine, Bonds, is actually cleaning my home. Like I will use cleaning as a way to numb. And I mean,
totally. I do that too.
Right?
I totally do that now that you say that out
loud. Or like any kind of mindless, well, it's not a mindless because our minds are always working, but any kind of task we would label as mindless, I will use it, instead of facing what I, am avoiding. Yeah. Because then you're like, oh, well, but I cleaned something, right?
Yeah, I was productive in this way. Yeah.
Yeah, right. But in reality, in my body is disturbed, right? As I do it because I'm avoiding something. But yeah. A hard one to sometimes acknowledge is actually can be a numbing strategy because you end up with something, right? You're like, well, great, my house is clean.
Some other things, that come up for numbing, may or may not be use of substances or impulsive eating, sweet, salty foods. Like there's a lot that we're doing right now to cope with what's happening on the planet, right? In all the ways, and through COVID as well. We talked about this, gosh, it's been months ago now, of just sort of the ways that we're filling our buckets throughout the day, right? And so, social media, surfing, TV, shopping can be sometimes a way that we will numb.
Spending money.
Yeah. So those are some of the kind of big ones that will stand out for a good chunk of us.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
So, naming those for yourself. And again, they could look like things that might use or do that weren't necessarily numbing in the moment. Right. But there's all kinds of ways we can numb. Right. So then, if we want to transition out of that powerlessness, right, it is a step-by-step process, right? So there's actually 6 steps that we can look towards to build resilience into our body, to build that courage muscle, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the first one might be obvious too, but we'll get you to really kind of feel through it. And you can write this down too. But it's first to just embrace the fall and its temporary nature, right? So think of an example, like a moment of failure that's happened for you. It can be something that comes up recently or something that you can think of within your life, right? And it doesn't have to, don't make this a big thing, right? This is maybe reacting to someone, mistreating someone, a coworker, a family member at some point that you're, later regretted. It can be, if you're currently studying a bad test score, right? But something that you would label a failure, right, for you. And so the first strategy, or the first step to this, is really just embracing that you've fallen, right? This is going to begin to sound like a lot of other techniques, especially in the mindfulness realm, of just like observing, noticing, becoming aware, right? So embracing that you've fallen, that, kind of knowing that all things are temporary, which is really hard to do when we start to feel really negative and put a lot of emotion on top of that failure, right? We tend to think it feels like forever, right? Remember back to our teenage years for most of us, right? And how everything that happened felt like it was your whole life.
End of the world. Oh gosh. Yes. Yeah. Right. All the things. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But just, you arrive where you are, ready to stand up, and knowing that it's temporary, then you can begin to realize and arrive in the moment with what's happened, right? Kind of embrace that moment. So that's really the first step. And so if you were to write this down, right, the first word might just be embrace, right? Embrace, right? And that can feel really, really hard to do. But I think embrace, an even more simple word is just acknowledge, right?
Yeah.
Because we'll go right away to that numbing or avoiding, or, and that can look at like a lot of different forms, especially in communicating. It can look to be defensive, right? And to react. And so that first step would be just embrace, acknowledge. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And the second step then is making the connection, or in Liz and I terms of really just getting curious, right? Mm-hmm. So what, we know that, mistakes or missteps are such a huge learning opportunity. And sometimes we acknowledge, of course, that can feel really hard, right? Mm-hmm. Everything is a learning opportunity, right? But diving down a little bit into all right, so here I am. I'm in this space. I'm in the arena, as Brene would call it, right? Dirt on my face, and this is happening. And all right, so what happened? How did I get here? And just getting curious about it, right? And not from a place of judgment, right? It's from a place of all right, so this happened. This doesn't feel super awesome. And so what can I do to improve the next time? How can I make it so that I can move forward in a way with love that, this doesn't happen. Sometimes we end up, in the arena and we have a misstep, or something happens that we had really no control over, right? And so honoring those spaces as well too, I think, is just really important. But starting to really, again, mind, body, heart, make a connection between what happened and what led up to that happening, right? And holding space for the knowing that whether it was something we could control or not control, right? I mean, there's only so much we can control, that there's this room for opportunity, that there's a space for opportunity here. And this really is where that pause comes into play, right?
Yeah. So the way you can practice this right now, right? And so if you have that pad of paper, if you've thought of one, right? If you've thought of a moment that you felt like a moment of small failure, right? So I just wrote down treated someone poorly, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like I wasn't super proud of a way that I talked to a friend last week. I was definitely responsive. So I wrote down treated someone poorly, right? So if I were to put myself back there and think about, okay, in that moment where I just have acknowledged, right? When could I have acknowledged? Now I did walk through this already because it was last week, right? But sooner, could I have embraced and acknowledged that I treated someone poorly, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then once I like allowed that, because I just simply recognize it, notice it, get curious about, why did that happen for me? Why was my body responsive that way? And again, not like Bonnie said, not from a place of judgment, but just learning about the self, right? And that's that curiosity part is, hey, and Bonnie and I, we love bringing humor in too, right? So we're, a little while ago, we like pumped our arms, right? To create kind of different emotion energy into our body. And so we were talking just before this going like, what if we pumped our arms being like, I made a mistake.
Yeah. And that was something I learned too from Erin this week, another friend in this space of, she was talking about how when she has like that happen, that she'll just be like, I love me. I love me. I love me, and Erin, if you're watching or if you hop on here at all, I practiced this because I had to redo a little piece of work that I had submitted. And I was like, oh man, just feeling kind of bummed, but I was like, it's okay. It's okay. It's okay.
Right.
And it's like, and she explained this, like, it's so hilarious to do. I just like ended up laughing and was like, okay, yeah, it really is okay. Like I'm taking myself too seriously right now, So.
Yeah. And I think that what that also does, Bonds, is that invites that pause that we've been talking about all month, right? Is when you recognize it and then begin to get curious, you're inviting that pause. And then you realize you have options from here, right? Right. And you realize you can respond differently, right? So the third step is to then celebrate the misstep, which I think is just a hard thing to just say out loud, but we do know that our failures are opportunities for growth and learning, right? And we know that some of those folks that have had huge successes in this world have had many, many failures, right? Over and over again. And I think Bonnie and I don't know if it was last week or the week before, Bonds, that we talked about how women take failures in our biology a little bit harder than men, right? Men are in our biology used to failure, right? So they're not afraid it doesn't hit them as hard to go out and get rejected over and over again, right? Whereas women, we're a little more afraid and we want something to be more perfect before we choose something and hoping that we don't experience the failure. So knowing that's also a little bit in our biology, celebrating this is an opportunity for growth and learning, right? Mm-hmm. So it's just like, and this is why it's so important, in my opinion, to practice mindful techniques, right? But it's just like in meditation, when people say, oh, I don't do it well, or I do it wrong, right? The only thing you're doing there that's wrong is judging how you're experiencing it, right? Mm-hmm. So it's going to look and feel like all different things. In fact, even some of the most well-known gurus of meditation talk about how like, oh, my mind was just wandering all day today, right? But they don't go, oh, now I'm bad at meditation. So it seems counterintuitive, but it's a moment where we can really celebrate that we've noticed where we've gone, right? And so same thing here, you can celebrate like, oh, whoa, wait, I'm human, just like that other human that hurt me last week, right? So we are no different than anyone else that goes through these same struggles and has these same failures. So celebrating that, becoming aware of that, and getting curious about that is that third step.
Love that. Yeah. And then the next step is practicing patience for yourself so you can really set the stage for what will come next. And I love Liz shared this quote, slow is smooth and smooth is fast. slow is smooth and smooth is fast. Because typically what happens if we have some kind of misstep, like our natural, reaction is to just kind of scramble, right? So like, okay, oh gosh, like that happened and now I've got to fix it and la 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 la, and it really can like dig us deeper into a hole. And it's the same concept of like, you get stuck in the mud or something or in snow. And, the worst possible thing to do is like, slam on your accelerator to try to like get you up and out of the mud pile. And that just makes it so much worse, right? So having that patience in those moments to just pause, again, coming back to the pause, I love this, and really focus on what comes next, right? As much as we can, of course, right? It just will allow us the opportunity to, again, to just set the stage for the next amazing opportunity that we can have. And a lot of this too comes back to working with growth mindset, and knowing that if we've experienced trauma, our bodies might be responding in different ways to whatever situations that we're in. And so to just, again, get curious about it, get curious of your patterns that we've noticed and talked about in the past, right? What are our emotional patterns so we can work to disrupt, right? And create some new pathways. So.
Yeah. And I love that analogy of we know that as soon as we get our car stuck, the first thing we want to do is just go, oh no, and hit on the gas to see if we can get out of it, right? But we know all that does is just create deeper ruts in the mud.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's such a good analogy. And so instead, again, like Bonnie said, that pause, right? And then the fifth step is reconnecting with your vision. So when we make a mistake, the mind tends to zoom in, right? We've talked about this before. This is actually a strategy that relates to the vagus nerve, is kind of opening up your vision, right? It's one of the ease keys we've shared in the past. So to really take a step back, look at the horizon, open up your vision, so they don't get trapped in the details, right? In that kind of tunnel vision effect. And that way you're seeing more of the big picture, right? You have more of probably a truer scope of the situation, and in terms of how you can then respond. What do you really want here? What are you, why are you doing this? How do you want to move forward, right? So taking that step back kind of invites those next questions, which then leads to 6 bonds.
Right. And 6 is just really taking that next step from a super connected place. So, when you're considering where you want to go next, and I'm going to use this a little bit because, COVID's been so interesting and we've all just been stripped of like all the things, right? And in this, we're in like one giant pause. And as things are kind of starting to come back, there's a quote that I've shared before, but it's like, be really intentional about what you add back in, right? And so I feel like to hold space for that and hold space for that connection, and then really intentionally moving forward. COVID's a huge example of a setback that all of us have had and an opportunity, right? But it allows us to then move forward in a really more connected and more powerful way. So, to be with your kind of highest version of yourself, right? That, all of us have, and we ebb and flow in and out of it, right? But like asking yourself questions like, all right, if I were in like my highest self right now, like what would my highest self do here, right? Because sometimes we react from a knee-jerk place, and that might not be like in alignment with our highest integrity or our highest values that we hold dear, So if we can take that moment to pause and respond from a place of our highest self and lead with love, then you can't go wrong,
Yeah. What a great, I mean, it makes so much sense to bring up COVID because it's just universal for us right now. you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
for most of us. Yeah.
Yeah. It's so true.
Yeah. So just, should we recap just the 6 in case you wanted to write them down? Like I actually just wrote them on my dry erase board, and I thought I would just like set it up in my kitchen for the week and just see how it feels to look at them bonds when I'm
good.
in response to stimulus. But so if we were to write down the 6, right, I would say, again, embracing it, like a moment you feel like you failed, right? Step 1, the biggest words to me, Bonds, you can share what you feel, is embrace, recognize, notice.
Yeah, love it.
Right. And step 2, I know he has it as make the connection, but I find it's easier than just like to do something than to say like, well, get curious, right? If you get curious, you're going to begin to naturally make that connection and ask yourself the right questions. So
yeah,
I would say get curious, right? 3, celebrate, right? Even if it feels silly to just like dance around and be like, I'm human, I'm a failure.
So good. Yeah.
We are all failures at certain moments in our lives, for sure.
Yeah.
So just celebrate, find a way to celebrate or add a little joy or humor, knowing that you are no different, right? 4, practice patience. That's slow is smooth and smooth is fast, right? And that really comes from experiential ed. Yeah, we use that a lot in experiential ed, and when we teach a lot of risk, we do a lot of things that teach a lot of risk, and you're stepping outside your comfort zone. And people just so quick to want to do something that could be then really unsafe, right? So we talk about how if you really slow down, how smooth you get, and then like from there, how quick you can actually be. And then, so again, practicing patience, right? And setting that stage for like what comes next. And then 5, kind of reconnecting with your vision, right? Like opening your sight up, taking that step back. So maybe opening up, stepping back, right? Reconnect with vision. And then the last step is just taking this last step from that place of all of this now culmination of connection and asking yourself the right questions, right? It really matters what you ask yourself here. So finding a question or 2 that feels really good for you. Bonnie asked, like, if I was, how did you put it?
My highest self.
On my highest self or your best self, like how would I then proceed, right? Yeah. So that's the 6.
So good. Oh, well, it looks almost, Liz, like we had a couple people that were having a hard time hopping on. And so I'm not 100% certain with what was going on there. But if you're back and you're watching on the replay, please feel free to just leave your comments, and we'll be so excited to, just hear how you're taking in this information and the ways that you're putting it into action in your life in really powerful ways. Yeah. So thanks so much for being here.
Yeah. Let's take a long pause, Bonds, to round out courage and just make this transition. Should we share our word for next month, or should we share that in the feed?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Let's do it.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So our word for next month is going to be energy. So just like this month where we went through kind of the science, we went through some, body-based strategies, some thought-based strategies, which is me and Bonnie's MO, and short-term strategies to understand and invite energy, and long-term strategies. We'll do the same thing for energy. So starting in June next week.
So exciting.
Yeah.
Yay.
Yeah. Long inhale in. Long breath out.
So good. With the cicadas.
I know. Can you still hear them?
Oh yeah, they're so loud.
That's awesome.
So good. Well, we hope that all of you have such a beautiful week. We'll be really excited to see you back here next week. And I'm excited to move forward towards energy. So we'll be calling that in. Calling it in. It's so exciting.
Cheers to all your future courageous moments.
Yes, so true. Thanks for being here with us.
Yeah. Bye, everyone.
Bye.